My name is Courtney Eldridge. I am the PTA president for 647 years here at Issaquah Middle School. Let's go ahead and just get into our meeting. So Jill, let's have you go first.
Motion to accept the February general membership meeting minutes as presented.
Okay, there's a motion to accept the general meeting minutes as presented. Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Perfect. Motion to accept the general meeting minutes as presented with a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Good, motion carries. Let's move on. Treasurer, you're up. You want my... Okay, while we're getting our treasurer's report, communications, do you have anything to report?
No updates. If you have any incoming sixth graders and teachers, please join our Facebook PTSA site to get updates about events at the school.
Okay, Ways and Means, anything to report?
Just one thing, we have a Dining for Dollars with Tuda Bala. That is April 13th through April 17th. If you order from Tuda Bala, you can order dine-in or you can actually go to the restaurant of any of their locations. Use Easy as Pie IMS and 20% of your purchase will go to the PTA.
Programs, anything to report?
Yeah, our annual multicultural night is coming up on April 25th. We are getting the kids ready to participate in that. We'll be looking for parent volunteers. So be checking our Facebook page when the announcement goes out. We'd love to have the parents help out setting up, taking down on site. So we'll be sending out announcements about that.
And also check our webpage so that you can sign up for the Multicultural Fair. We'll go ahead and put that up after the participants who will sign up. Okay. It's okay. You kind of threw a monkey wrench into the poor treasurer here. Yes, go ahead. Hospitality.
Okay, we're starting to look at Teacher Appreciation Week. If anybody has got really good deals on t-shirts, let me know. Something less than $2.60 per shirt. That'd be great.
Okay. Treasurer.
Good evening, everybody. Austin Elliott. I'm the new treasurer for the PTSA since I believe January. So what you see on the screen there is the treasurer's report that runs from the last meeting in February to now to today. So if you look at the balances there, we're checking and savings. We're at a total of $40,000.
Mike's not actually on.
It's not on?
It's
Not
on.
hearing?
There we go. Now
There
we
we go.
You just have to keep it really close to your mouth.
Yeah, apparently so.
Yeah.
All right, so the totals there, you can see $40,451.19. We've had $31 in income and $3,624.19 in expenses, and that was mostly for the school events that we just had, the solo ensemble and the fifth grade visit. So motion to accept the treasurer's report as presented, unless there are any questions.
Motion to accept it.
Okay, motion to accept treasurer's report as presented with a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, motion carries.
All right, thank you.
And can you leave that up for 1 second? Can you bring up the Panther store on the report? So for anybody here that is a member of our PTA, we do need to take a vote to add additional funds to one of our line items. Panther store. So one of our Tier 1 interventions that we have at our school is run by our MTSS, Heather McDonough. I don't know if she's here. She's here. Do you want to tell them what Panther store is?
Sure. So the Panther store, the kids are really invested this year. I'd say more so than I have seen in years because we link our kindness passport to it. We link school incentives to it. We just linked a school-wide reading and goal tracking passport to it. So it's highly incentivizing of positive behavior in the school of all students. And I would say a lot more students access it. And currently, we only have $1,000 allocated for the whole school for all year, which we are definitely spending above that. And that's why you might have seen asks for donations and kind of a reach out to the community. And so I talked with Courtney to increase that balance, to offer more incentives and some better incentives. And I have been trying to get everything very cheap, but as Courtney would know, as you know, prices have gone up, and so it's harder to allocate what we want and the resources for the store because the increase in prices across the board. So we are asking for more money to help fund the Panther Store.
Perfect. Does anybody have any questions about Panther Store? No? Okay. The nuts and bolts of it is this. When I first started PTA president, we gave Panther Store, I think, $750. We upped that to $1,000, but that's all they get for a year. And we have about 820 some odd kids, so that's really nothing. And she's right. She gives me 47,050-cent receipts from like Shine and stuff. So, so we would like to propose, the board has discussed it, to add $1,000 to that current line item of $1,000, so the new amount would be $2,000. Does anybody have any questions about that? Any discussion? Yes?
I actually have a question about the Panther Store.
Yes.
So I've asked my son about the Panther Store and about, it seems like he's coming home with a lot of stuff as well. But what I've heard from him is that part of the reason why some students are able to bring home a lot of stuff is because they're using Panther bucks from previous years. And so I'm curious.
We call that generational wealth.
So I'm curious, like, is it intended to be that way, or?
I'm gonna let our MTSS take that one.
Yes, that does happen. As Courtney said, maybe generational wealth, the passing down of the Panther bucks. We do incentivize different, and like for kids to get rid of them. And so we say, oh, the Panther bucks may be changing over, spend your Panther bucks, but a lot of students like to hold on to the Panther bucks and really keep them. So that is a consideration for the future, that if we want to switch Panther bucks every year. We did switch Panther bucks, I think 2 years ago, and we don't accept any of the old Panther bucks. So really, any of the new Panther bucks would be in the last 2 years. And we are making the Panther bucks in-house, where we used to spend money to have it externally made, and we no longer do that. So that is something that could be considered.
And we also try to do some stuff at the end of the school year too, to try to get them to turn in all their old ones too, like bigger prizes and bigger things, so that, again, it can kind of get all the Panther bucks back from other kids and stuff too. But a couple years ago, it was like wooden and plastic coins, and these are now more like, kind of like the elementary schools do. They're more like a paper square that are laminated that we just use over and over and over again. And we've also changed it to be $5 ones versus just a $1 one, to also kind of like incentivize the rewards and stuff like that for kids to do more things in the classroom and stuff, and to be recognized for bigger things too. So we're changing stuff, and we've heard feedback too. A lot of the 6th graders love it, and a lot of the teachers give a lot more in 6th grade as that transition from elementary to middle. 7th grade, a little more, right? But then 8th grade, a lot of the 8th graders are kind of like, I've done this for 2 years. I don't really want Panther bucks. They give their Panther bucks to some of the 6th graders and younger siblings too. So that's also another part of the problem. So.
Although we did change that this year, because this was a concern, we created baskets and giveaways that they could purchase raffle tickets, and they would go all in a drawing. And that incentivized a lot in basketball time and kind of diversified, so it was a wide variety of prizes. And we have seen an increase this year in 8th grade participation compared to years previous.
Yeah, the only reason why I was asking is like if we're anticipating this just being a flip from like a bunch of old bucks coming in, or but it's,
I have a junior and I have an 8th grader, and my junior passed his bucks down, so that's why we call it generational
is to increase the budget line for the Panther store from $1,000 to $2,000.
Okay,
You have a second?
motion is on the floor to increase the Panther store budget from $1,000 to $2,000. Do we have a second? Multiple seconds, okay. Motion with a second to increase Panther store from $1,000 to $2,000. We've already had discussion, so we won't do that. All opposed? Not all opposed, I did it wrong. It's good nobody's opposed though. All right, all in favor? Aye. Perfect. All right, we know nobody's opposed, so motion carries. Congratulations, Panther store.
Thank you.
Quit sending me so many receipts. All right, so the last thing, I didn't miss anybody, right? On the board? Okay. The last thing that we have, you're done. You're all set. We have Laura Gaffney here. She's going to do a quick little presentation for our Issaquah Schools Foundation.
Thank you, Courtney. Can you guys hear me without the microphone? We good? Okay. Courtney said, I'm Laura Gaffney. I'm the board president at the Issaquah Schools Foundation this year, but I'm also a parent of 2 middle school students at PCMS and a freshman at IHS. And there we go. I'm here just to share a little brief overview about the Issaquah Schools Foundation and offer community invitations. So we work to open doors and create access to more opportunities for students across the entire school district. We know that state and federal funding only covers kind of very basics of public education, and some might not even say that. And so it requires local levies and bonds and PTAs and boosters in the foundation to step in and partner with our schools to create the educational experience that we want our students to have. And so where the PTAs are building specific and work, in this school community to create good programs for students and teachers, the foundation works across the district to fund programs that are available at all schools or across like a full level. So all elementary schools getting extra phonics books, to middle schools getting STEM curriculum enrichment funding. We also help pilot programs for the district to test something out to see if it's something that can scale across the district. And so our areas of focus are academic support, academic enrichment, community outreach, and student well-being. And across all those areas are specific programs that impact students at Issaquah Middle School every day, from after-school academic support to enrichment like the robotics club, tools for school backpacks and school supplies to start the year, to youth and mental health first aid training for counselors and staff. So I know this community is involved, cares deeply about the experience of students here and kind of across our district. And so if our work interests you or sparks excitement for you, then please join us on May 1st at Nourish Every Mind, which is our annual luncheon fundraiser. It is a short 1-hour program, but I promise you will leave uplifted and inspired, hearing directly from students at elementary, middle, and high school about the impact that the community coming together can have on their experience. So we have lovely table captains, Courtney Eldridge and Melissa Valdez-Connor, putting together tables for Issaquah Middle School. So you're with people in your community. We're in kind of the same feeder pattern as the IHS, Clark, and IBE. So you're around people you know, and it's a really wonderful opportunity to come together. So if you have any questions, I'm going to stay for the meeting. Happy to answer anything, and I hope to see some of you there on May 1st.
Thanks, Laura. Does anybody have any questions for Laura? All sure you're all prepared for the main event. We're going to go ahead and just get started. We have some handouts, but I'll go ahead and put just the agenda items up on the screen as well. As I said earlier, for those of you that had not joined us yet, my name is Courtney Eldridge, and I am the Issaquah Middle School PTA president, or PTSA president, excuse me. And what sort of spurred this community engagement event? Actually, before I go on, I probably need to welcome, I do see we have a couple of special guests in our audience. I see we have 2 school board members in our audience, Director Moraldo.
She's like, Moraldo.
I did. I raised my hand.
I was waiting for the Mullings. Hi.
Director Moraldo and Director Mullins are here. Thank you for coming. We also have a community member from the Y, David Marshall. He works with a lot of our youth, and he's here. Do we have any other people in the room that are involved in youth anything in the community? Okay. Tell us.
I'm Carolyn Day, and I'm the advisor for the East Side Community Accountability Board. We call it the CAB. We work under the umbrella of the Review Network.
Amazing.
I'm John Robertson, I'm on the CAP with the Carolyn.
For being here.
Hi, my name is Mark Clemens. I'm on the PTSA board here, but I'm also the executive director of Friends of Issaquah Salmon Hatchery or Fish.
Anybody else? Is anybody a teacher here? Raise your hand if you're a teacher. Is anybody a parent here? Yay. Is anybody a former employee of Issaquah Middle School? All right, and does anybody else who works at Issaquah Middle School, raise your hand, please. Not a teacher, but under all the other guises. So over here we have our principal, Mark Jurgens-Zamuda, and our assistant principal, Miss Amy Betson. What spurred this event was approximately a month ago, and Chief Swan, don't get upset with me, I messed up the dates. A message went out to the community that 3 youth had been arrested. And of those 3 youth, 2 of them are students at Issaquah Middle School. It was very disturbing to the community. Unfortunately though, it was not something that was we weren't that surprised, unfortunately. And so as a PTA, we're considered to be sort of the leaders of the parents, basically, of the school. And so we've decided, I talked to a couple of my board members and I said, you know, what about if we had like the police come talk to us, like the Issaquah Police Department? What about if we had the King County Juvenile Prosecuting Attorney come? Okay, well, you know, oh yeah, let's do it. So these 2 individuals were gracious enough to answer the call. I really, really appreciate them. So we will go ahead and start with Chief Swan. I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself. The only thing I know about you is that I saw, do you have a daughter named Courtney? It's an amazing name. Okay, go ahead.
Did you guys prefer I use the mic?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Courtney. My name is Paul Schwan. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Issaquah. I have been for permanently and officially for 2 years, but unofficially for 4. I've worked for the City of Issaquah for almost 8 years now. I do not have children in the district, but I do have 3 daughters, and I was an SRO for 5 years in the city of Fife, which is a very target-rich environment. And also, I do have a daughter named Courtney. She's a professional athlete.
I am not.
So, thanks for inviting me here tonight. One of the reasons that I'm here to talk to you about is some of the trends that we've seen as far as the juvenile crime in the city of Issaquah. Some of the reason I'm also here is to dispel any information that maybe you've received that is not accurate. I want you to have accurate information. We were invited to come, but I decided that it was better for you to get it from the top than for you to get any other information from some of my staff that maybe they would have to say, oh, I'll have to talk to my chief, or you'll have to, maybe I'm not sure. So I think it's very important for you to get it directly from the people that are making those decisions. So that's one of the reasons I'm here to talk to you tonight. I'm going to start with just some data to start. I'm assuming that maybe you didn't get this information from Ryan to get the PowerPoint. Okay, so I will forward this to her and she can move it along to all of you and push it out. First, a definitional disclaimer. Juvenile-related crime involves all offenses, which it's all offenses involving juveniles under the age of 18 as the subject, unless otherwise it was noted. These are only those reported to the police department as far as our data goes, either officially or via an anonymous tip line. Important, and not everything reported is automatically a crime, just to be known. All cases have to be followed up and investigated first before they're considered a crime, and we make sure what that entails. Reported crime through 2014 to 2024 has been on the increase. There was a huge dip during the COVID years, as you can imagine, with not the kids being in school very much. In 2014, there were 42 crimes that were reported to the Issaquah Police Department, and we've moved up gradually to where in 2019 it was up to 146. There was that dip, went down to between 73 and 89 between 2020 and 2022. And then we've gone up from 22 to 24, and in 2024 there was 211. And there's 34 to date in 25. And we're actually on an increase to be the most yet that's going to be reported with the trend that we're seeing right now. So there will be an increase from what we're seeing. Now, juvenile fight-related incidences. In 2023, we had 8 reports. In 24, we had 23 reports. That's a huge increase in difference. And in 25 year-to-date, we have 7 so far in 2.5 months. Reports often mention ongoing bullying, fighting, threats of fighting, or other types of harassment. Most reports tend to list fights directly after school between 3 and 5 p.m. They're either near the school properties or common walking paths or in the lower highlands. And in 2025 is on the course to have, like I said, the highest number of juvenile-related fights in the last few years. Part of the concerns and issues are these are the ones that have been reported to us. So if there's not an instance that takes place that we are reported to, if it happens on school property and we haven't been reported by it hasn't been told to us by school or parents, we don't have that documented. There's also been some instances that have happened that have taken place, and what needs to also be known is it's not a crime if it's someone that's 12 and under, which happens to be some of the kids at the middle school. So 12 and under, they cannot legally commit a crime because they have to have the capacity to commit a crime. And that's not just kids 12 and under, there's other people with the mental capacity that don't have that either, whether they're people with Alzheimer's or dementia or developmental issues or concerns. So there are other cases, but specifically 12 and under. So if there's a juvenile that's committed a crime and they're under 12 or 12 and it's been reported, it's not going to be documented, it's not going to be forwarded to the prosecutor because it'll be documented, let me be clear, at the police department in our reference system. But it won't be as far as their background, as far as their criminal background. That also won't be the case in the event that if we don't get a report from the school, even though maybe one of your children has been in an altercation or a fight, we don't hear about it unless someone reports it to us. The other thing that's a huge trend there that happened during this trend and increase is the SROs were no longer at schools here in Issaquah. So I do want to be very specific about that too. But we do work in collaboration with the school on a regular basis. So anytime they call, they have any threats that are going on, if you see a police car that's parked out in the turn section, sometimes before or after school, we are there to make sure and prevent any larger scale things that might be happening. And so we do work in collaboration, they do call us, we respond every time they call for service, It's not that we don't work together, we just don't have someone specifically stationed here at a school right now. And that was a decision that was a joint effort between the city and the school district at that time. So that's one of the biggest things. The other thing is the process this takes. When we get a report that there's been a crime, what happens is we go and we take that police report. We have to follow up, it has to be investigated, we have to talk to all the parties. If it's not followed through, if parents specifically do not let us know and finish statement forms on what took place, because everybody has busy lives, things like that, and they don't have the time to do that, then the case gets closed. It doesn't get forward to the juvenile prosecutor. With Mr. Hung, he'll respond and be able to give you some little more data and information about how that process works for him as well. The other thing is too, there's been question about, well, going back to the process, if we have officers, we've had a lot of turnover at our police department in the last 5 years. So we have a lot of officers in training. So when they take a police report, they have to also complete that report, then it gets forwarded to a sergeant. If they happen to report that to a sergeant and there's corrections that need to be made, it gets kicked back because we don't want it sent up to the prosecutor's office and it not be accurate, not have all the elements of the crime. So then it gets kicked back. Well, if they're on a day off, then it's waiting till they get off. Well, they have 4 days off. So then they have to come back. And so there is a process. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, it just doesn't happen tomorrow, all the time. So it needs to be known there is a process. It doesn't mean we ignore the fact that this is happening. It doesn't mean we ignore that these things are taking place. These reports actually do happen and we do forward them on. But we wanted to make sure that it's accurate information. We want to get all the people that maybe were involved as well. So those are other pieces to that take place when they're, so it's not a super fast process. And then please understand that we're small town of Issaquah. He's the prosecutor for the entire King County for the juvenile system. So imagine us times however many jurisdictions you have, Mr. Hung, and so they have to go through and sift through all of those and then go to court, and he could talk about diversion and those things in that process and what that looks like. But it's not that we're not forwarding those cases on and stepping through that process. So that's one big piece of how this works. And we do take the reports. We take every report that we've ever gotten, we document them, we make sure we do their follow-up. Now, as far as responding, we have sometimes, our minimum staffing is 3. We want everybody that here live, work, and play here in the city of Issaquah to feel very safe and go to school, right? We want them all to be very safe. But we have sometimes a minimum staffing of 3 and 4. We have a squad sometimes has 6 for 40,000 people. So we can't just sit outside or on a trail. We do the best we can and when stuff's happening. And one thing we request and we ask is that people call 911 if they're seeing something when it's happening. And that's huge. And then also even after the fact, let us know, because then we can see these trends if it's happening at certain locations. We can work with certain community members, we can work with parents, and we can do things to help you preventative. We also put on a lot of different classes, our community resource officer that we got away from during COVID and our staffing low levels, that now we're increasing on doing our parent project, which is a 10-week program, which we work with parents of troubled kids that are having issues or concerns in the community, and how to work with them and collaborate, and we give them resources. And we also have tons of other resources that we work with on a regular basis as well. So I will be here for the whole meeting too, so you guys can get more information. You can ask a lot more questions, I'm sure everybody has. I do care about this community, not just because I work here and I'm the chief of police. I coach. I have 240 kids that I coach on a regular basis in a different city, but they come from all over, and I have last year and this year, even on my team specifically, kids that are in this district. So it does matter, not just my actions here when I'm working, but outside, because they come from your jurisdiction as well. So it's very important. And I'll let Mr. Hung and we can collaborate as far as talk further, but we'll both be here to answer more questions as well, moving forward, and that you have for tonight, and things we can do together to help work towards this. Mr. Hung.
I'll go ahead and quickly introduce Mr. Hung. I asked him when I spoke with him today, can
proud Newport Knight, graduate 1991.
Yeah, bad news. The other thing he told me that I thought was just ironic, his niece actually attends Issaquah Middle School. So he has a connection here. So at any rate, without further ado, we will have Mr. Hopsey.
All right, thank you for me. So Alex over there, I told her she couldn't throw stuff at me, so that's why she's sitting way back there. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jimmy Hung. I'm the Chief Deputy Prosecutor for the Juvenile Division of the King County Prosecutor's Office. I'm going to explain a little bit more about myself, just so you know like who's giving you information and kind of what my experience is. So I'm a lifelong King County resident. Like I said, I grew up on the east side here in Bellevue. I went to the University of Washington undergrad and University of Washington Law School, so I'm a double dog. And then promptly joined the King County Prosecutor's Office in 1999. And I've been there ever since, so over 25 years. It's a long time when you tell people, how long have you been a prosecutor? And I talk about it in centuries, right? I've been there a quarter of a century. During that time, I have done every kind of case that you can imagine a prosecutor handling. Everything from, as a baby prosecutor, prosecuting DUI cases to handling homicide cases, and then for the bulk of my career as a frontline prosecutor, I was prosecuting physical and sexual abuse of children cases, right? And then for a good chunk of my career, I was supervising our felony domestic violence unit. So you might be saying, well, how did you end up in juvenile? Right? So about 10 years ago, they asked me to come lead our juvenile practice. And I will tell you, with all that experience, these last 10 years have been some of the most impactful work in my career because, you know, when I was prosecuting those really violent, serious cases as a frontline prosecutor, what I constantly noticed was when you looked at the criminal history of these people, there was a lot of juvenile history, right? And then so I really saw this as an opportunity to have my position as a prosecutor where we can impact the lives of young people who might be going the wrong direction and maybe keep them from graduating to adult crimes and causing a lot of the trouble that we see in our communities today. And so that's really my passion. That's what really brings me here. And I want to thank you all for inviting myself and Chief Swan here. I think it's vitally important that the folks that we serve trust the people that are doing this work because it requires you to trust us a lot because, you know, a lot of what we do is in a vacuum and you don't have all the information and you have to trust that we're doing what we say we're doing and that we're doing it right. And so I really welcome these opportunities to come share information with people, speak the truth and all that stuff. I'm gonna lead with letting you know that I don't have all the answers and there are probably things that I say that people aren't gonna like or are gonna disagree with, but what I can't promise a lot of things, but what I can promise you is that I'm gonna be completely honest with you and tell you exactly what the law is and what I can and what my team can and cannot do, and then try my best to answer any questions that you have. And then if I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you I don't know it, and then if I can try and find the answer, I'm going to do my best to do that as well, all right? So I'm going to start off just like Chief Swan started off by giving a little bit of data on kind of the trends on juvenile crime. I really like that the chief started, you know, in COVID because you don't need me to tell you that. That was a pretty impactful time, not just for all of us in this room, but particularly for our children, okay? And as the chief said, juvenile crime was at an all-time low during COVID because, as you mentioned, kids weren't able to get together and make bad decisions together, all right? But I want to go back further in time to when I started as a prosecutor. So in 1999, just to to give you a sense of how the trends on juvenile crime historically have changed, all right? So when I started as a prosecutor, the largest team of prosecutors in the King County Prosecutor's Office was in juvenile court, because we were prosecuting that many juvenile cases, okay? So to give you a sense of the scale, at the turn of the century, and I'm going back centuries now, at the turn of the century, my office, on average, received about 15,000 cases from police in King County per year, only for juveniles. All right, 15,000. And then my office had prosecutors who charged about 8,000 or so cases into King County Juvenile Court. We had a 220-bed juvenile detention center that was regularly packed to the gills, and we had children double bunked in our juvenile detention facility, all right? At that time, there was a lot of data, research that talked about how ineffective the juvenile justice system was, how much harm it caused, how it made things worse. And so there was a movement to steer away from using punitive criminal justice responses to a lot of juvenile offending, okay? And just to give you a sense of how we viewed juvenile delinquency back then, it was pretty common that a lot of the kids that were sitting in detention were in detention because they didn't go to school. And we had truancy laws that said the judge could incarcerate children because they didn't go to school, all right? So fast forward over the last 2 decades, and I'm proud in the last decade I was involved in some of this, is to really take a lot of the science and research around what are best practices. And so we reduced the reliance on juvenile detention, we reduced the reliance on prosecutors and judges and defense attorneys, and we relied on a lot of good people like these amazing people who volunteer their time on community accountability boards. And so there was a lot more diverting kids out of the juvenile justice system, all right? And so over the course of the last 2 decades, you can actually see, when you plot it out, consistently every year, juvenile referrals from law enforcement dropped about 15 to 20% per year, okay? So going all the way to, I'm not gonna count the COVID years, I'm gonna talk about 2019, because that was the year right before COVID. So remember those numbers I told you, 15,000 referrals a year, we filed 8,000 cases. In 2019, we probably received 3,200 cases from police, and then my office charged roughly 1,500 cases. All right, so that's a reduction from 15,000 to around 3,200, 8,000 filings into juvenile court to around 1,200 cases, okay, or 1,500 cases. Now, if you can do the math, that's upwards of almost 90% reduction. And then when you factor in also over the last 20 plus years, the population in King County has grown by about 35%. All right. So in the grand scheme of things, that's the trajectory that we're going, and I would like to take a lot of credit that King County is special, that we're seeing this across the country, okay? Now going back to when COVID happened, we hit these all-time lows where, again, we have a new juvenile detention center now. There's 119 beds, so we don't have 220 anymore. And during COVID, at the height of COVID, I think we had 6 children in detention at any given time. All right, we're now up to like 60 something. But the reason that is the case, and if you know any pediatricians here, if you go talk to a pediatrician and ask them about how our children are doing with their mental health after COVID, and it is rather disturbing, right? The kids who are in middle school today were in elementary school during all the lockdowns, and there's a lot of understanding now about the level of challenge that has resulted in our children. And so we are seeing now that it's 2025, as we're coming out of, you know, lockdown and those kids are coming back to school and things are changing. Yes, so those numbers are starting to go up. You're starting to see more fights, more, you know, issues around harassment and all that stuff. And so there's definitely the uptick that we're seeing, but I also want to stress, like, there is that uptick, which is understandable, but in the grand arc of time over the last 2 decades, we're still very, very low. So that's something that I'm trying to share some positive news. But with that being said, anytime 3 kids are being arrested, that's cause for alarm. So I'm not here to suggest that we shouldn't be here meeting. I mean, that's why we're here, and people want to talk about that. And I think that's super important, right? So for that, I want to give kind of that perspective, and then I think now I want to talk a little bit about what my role as a prosecutor is. And I think the easiest way that I could put this is, I know that, you know, a lot of people probably at one point or another watch the show. If you watch Law and Order, we are the second half, and the chief is the first half, right? And so as Chief Swan said, you know, their response to investigating crime requires people to report it, and they get the information, or they see it themselves, right? And then not everything that they investigate, or not everything they see, once the dust settles and they collect as much evidence as they can and as much credible information as they have, not everything actually amounts to a crime, right? And then so I have a lot of faith in our law enforcement partners that they make really good judgments in that regard, right? And then when they do investigate a case, if they believe there's probable cause to believe that someone committed a crime, then they will refer that case to my office, and then my office will review it. And then we have our own standards that we apply, ethical standards as lawyers, to look at the evidence and then apply the standard of proof and then take some legal action, right? Because as prosecutors, what you know, it took me a little while after I got out of law school to really appreciate how massive this responsibility is. You know, they give a lawyer the power to take a pen and sign a document, and I can take away someone's liberty, okay? Or give someone criminal history that might affect their prospects of employment or housing and all that stuff. And so we take our jobs incredibly seriously, all right? And that means it requires facts and evidence, and we review it, and then we make some legal decision that's our responsibility as prosecutors, right? And so what I know that we do, because I look at what my team is able to accomplish, is every single referral that we receive from law enforcement, my team reviews it, there's a lawyer that reviews it, and we make a legal decision on it. So we will decide that there's enough facts and evidence that someone committed a crime, a juvenile in this case committed a crime, and that we're able to take action, and then we will make a decision. We'll either charge the case, or we can choose to divert the case. And those are the things that we can do as prosecutors once we think that we have enough evidence that someone committed a crime. If we don't have enough evidence, but we think that the police can maybe do a little more investigation, then we reach back out to law enforcement and let them know, hey, we're missing X, Y, and Z. Would your folks be willing to go talk to more people, investigate this thing, because that evidence might allow us to make a charge, right? And then the obvious other option is we look at the case and there's no crime, or there isn't enough evidence to prove the crime and we can't take legal action. And what I can tell you is that every time we make that decision, any of those decisions, there is documentation of it. And if we choose to, if we find that there isn't enough evidence to file a case or charge a case, we notify every police department and tell them exactly the reasons why we couldn't take action. And we put it in a memo. It's subject to public disclosure. Anyone can ask our office for it, and we will provide the explanation and be crystal clear, transparent about why we made that decision. Okay. Now, speaking specifically about Issaquah, I didn't have time today to look at the numbers with that level of detail, but I did look at our cases that we've received from Issaquah Police Department for 2025. I believe we've received about, it was 13 or 14, I have the number in my head, but it's somewhere in that. So you heard the chief say that they've had 33 reports? 34 in 2025, and then again, as she said, not every report amounts to a crime, but of those 34, they sent us about 13 or 14. The number is not important because what I can tell you is my office has already reviewed every single one of those and made some decision on each of them. All right? And I want to say, like, that's also not unique. I appreciated the chief telling you all that, yes, we respond, or we're responsible for every juvenile crime in all of King County, okay? That means every misdemeanor, every felony, including homicide cases. Today I just filed homicide cases on a 15-year-old daughter, okay? So those are the things that my office is doing. But what my main sort of like focus with my team is we don't want any case sent to us from law enforcement sitting in someone's inbox. Because as you guys know, when we're talking about children who have committed a crime, the last thing that I can do as a prosecutor that would be the most ineffective is to let that sit and us not do anything about it. Because you're all here and you all have children, and as you know, like if your kid does something wrong in your house, the worst thing you could do is not do anything about it for a long time, right? And then let's say 6 months later, if my daughter, let's say my daughter violates some house rule and I don't do anything about it when it happens, but then I try and do something about it 6 months later, that's ridiculous. It's not gonna, it's totally ineffective, right? And so our team takes that responsibility super seriously. And to the extent that we can say we don't have any backlog, we really don't. Like every case that comes into my office, we are reviewing it typically within 72 hours and trying to make a decision as soon as we can. We don't always make a decision within 72 hours because sometimes we need to get more evidence, we need to figure things out, or we need to like talk more about it. But someone has eyes on it and we're trying to make a decision as soon as we can. So those are some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about in terms of our practice. I do want to touch a little bit on diversion because I got some correspondence from folks, and I just want to dispel some sense of, you know, some things that I think could be construed as misinformation. Our office, we do believe in the power of diversion because I can sit here and I can show you all the studies that talk about how effective diversion programs are and how ineffective bringing kids into the juvenile justice system is. With that being said, we do it all the time because if I'm going to remove a child from their family, take them out of their school, remove them from their community and lock them in a facility, that we need to have due process. There are laws, and those are the cases that I charge and bring into juvenile court. But there are also really powerful programs that, you know, when kids cause harm, break laws, we can hold them accountable in an age-appropriate way and hopefully get them going in the right direction so they're not gonna grow up and be those adult criminals that I was prosecuting 10 years ago, okay? And so there are really robust diversion programs in King County that we support and that are very effective despite some media information out there, and I'm happy to talk about it. But with that being said, we do both. Like I like to say, like my team, we're able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Like we we have very experienced prosecutors that look at a case and we can make the decision, are we gonna divert that case or are we gonna file it? There's also something in the law called mandatory diversion, all right? In a nutshell, what that means is every juvenile essentially gets one bite at the apple. Meaning like they get, if Chief Swan arrests a kid for mostly lower level offenses, and they send me that case, and we find that there's enough evidence that that kid committed that crime, if it's that kid's first offense, I don't have a choice. That case must be diverted, all right? So there is that law which diverts a lot of cases, and the really good news is that law is actually quite good, it's quite effective, because the data and statistics show that about 90% of those kids we never see again. And those are kids like me, right? When I was at Newport Night, now as a prosecutor, I go back and think about the stupid stuff I did with my cousin over there, Greg Roop, Dr. Greg Roop. Yeah, like one thing I did was a felony. It was stupid, right? Like we need to build a project for school, and I got all of my other honor society friends and said, hey, they're building houses down the street from my house. Let's go steal some lumber. And so we went and stole lumber. All right, totally stupid. And I'm not proud that we did that. I'm not proud that we got away with it. But at the same time, I also think about like if I got caught and some prosecutor decided to charge me with a felony, I don't know if I go to UW Law School. I don't know if I end up going to being the chief prosecutor. And so it's just like those kids, you know, may do things that amount to crimes, but a lot of times what all the data shows is that almost all the kids grow out of it, and they learn not to make those mistakes, and that's why diversion is a really great program, because 90% of those kids don't even see them again. And so we don't take those kids and inject them into a system that might spit them out and make them criminals. So that's the whole concept behind diversion. Have I gone too long?
No, you're good.
Okay. Last thing I want to talk about, and this is where I said I was going to be totally honest with you. I'm going to talk about something I don't know that much about. I'm not really an expert, and it's around FERPA. All right, many of you know what that, I've heard of that acronym. It stands for, I believe it's the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. So that is a federal law that protects student and family information. All of us who have children in schools benefit from this law because it protects our information from being disseminated, and information that is oftentimes extremely private. You know, I have a daughter who has a learning difference. I'm very proud of that because she has overcome that and she's doing amazingly well. But if she didn't have the protection of this law, that might be out there, and it's her information and my family's information that it should be our choice to have that out in the open. So this law protects, you know, parents and students. So there's a lot of good associated with this law. I want to start there. Now, as FERPA intersects with my office's ability to get information, or the police department's ability to get information on criminal investigations, there is some friction there. There's no doubt about it. Okay? And so the easiest thing I can share with folks is that I know that every school district has their general counsel, their attorneys that they consult regarding this law, and they're advised by their attorneys what they should or shouldn't do, okay? And that's where I'm here to say, like, I'm not an expert in that, and I can see all different sides to why lawyers would advise school districts one way versus another. My understanding of the law is that when it comes to a criminal investigation, there is really only one area where schools are required to cooperate with the police, or required to disclose information to the police, and it's around mandatory reporting. All right? There are teachers here, I'm sure there are people in this room who are in professions where you understand what that means when it's mandatory reporting. Meaning that if you come across information that leads you to believe that a child is suffering abuse, you have to report that to the police, right? So for example, if your children are at school and they're engaging with a teacher and the teacher has reason to believe or has information that leads them to believe that the student's being abused, they must report that to the police, okay? Oh, or the state, there you go. There you go. I'm sorry, see? Thank you.
What did you say?
They could report to the police as well, yes, all right. Anyways, mandatory reporting. I'm a mandatory reporter, all right? That's the only area where I'm aware that a school must do something. Everything else, in terms of crimes, it's permissive. Like, the school may disclose in a lot of certain situations, or they don't have to, okay? So, what I can tell you is that there are some school districts who, when I ask the police to go get information about a crime that's occurred on school campus, there are some school districts that will share that information rather freely, okay? There are other school districts who, based on whatever advice that they've received from their council, will require law enforcement to get a search warrant. All right? And that is part of what the law allows schools to do, which is to tell law enforcement to get a search warrant. And so when we are confronted with that, we will work with law enforcement to get a search warrant if it's appropriate. And so, but my understanding is that Issaquah School District is one of those districts, in my experience, where they will ask us to get search warrants, and we will do that. If we will work with police and get it, if that's what we think the case needs or is warranted, and I don't have a problem doing that. And so, but I will say that, just to give some context, Issaquah is one of the only school districts in King County that we work with that have that requirement. And again, I'm not here to say that that's right or wrong. I'm just, like I said at the beginning, I'm just giving you the information, facts as I have. And so that's all I have to share. I'm sure there are a lot of questions, and so there you go.
So a couple other things that changed that Mr. Lund touched base on is the laws in the last 10 years have changed drastically regarding juveniles. For example, when we come in contact with juveniles, the new law that was put in place 2 years ago now is that every time we come in contact with a juvenile, we're required to provide them an attorney before we can talk to them about anything. So that's hindered our steps in what we do as well. It used to be they could invoke an attorney, but they couldn't invoke parents. Well, now it doesn't matter what they invoke, we have to literally provide them an attorney. We can't literally ask them any questions at all. So that is one step. And I can say in 24, we had over 17 search warrants just to do an investigation. And so in Issaquah for the middle school and high school. So that being the case, it makes it a longer process as well, because the information that we need to get the case referred sometimes, we know that we have to get that before we even give it to the prosecutor's office. Sometimes it's not even that he's asking for it, is that we apply for the warrant because we know that we need that information before we can send it to him. So those are other parts that are that we're working through and that we have to work on. The other part too is that we have to have victims. And so what's happening in some of these cases that you're hearing about some kids' violence is they're doing it to get on social media. Some of the kids are joining away from the school on purpose because they want to be on social media, and they're going to be filmed in these fights. So then parents, some other parents or bystanders see that this is happening. We have to have a victim to have a crime. And so if I don't have a willing participant or someone that's a victim, and they say, oh, these kids are jumping these kids, well, sometimes they're going there intentionally, not telling parents. So I don't have a victim because they want to be part of the videos. So that's also another piece that needs to be understood, that it isn't just that people are out there just doing bad things. Sometimes they're partaking just to get on social media. So that is another element of this that is not okay, but that's legitimately what's happening. So, yes?
Are you saying that there are kids who want to be the victim so that they're in the video? Is that what you're saying?
It's not a victim, they're wanting to be part of it. So they go and agree to go meet whoever to have a fight so they can videotape it, so they can put it on social media. So, again, not okay, but that is part of and some of the things that we're seeing, which is unfortunate. Because we have taken reports on any kids that have been involved in it, and those that are willing and tell their parents that they're being victims, we take the reports, parents come in, and we prosecute, and we take the reports on those cases. But we have some that no one ever even knows about. Not the school, not the parents, not anybody, because they intentionally went there to be part of this so they can be videotaped. Doesn't mean they'll be the victim, maybe that they're gonna be the victor, I mean, I don't know. But the point is that they're partaking in this, and that's becoming part of the problem where someone might see there's an altercation and think it's someone's being beat up. But the reality is sometimes they're doing this to do other things, like get on social media, and they're posting it on certain different websites. So that's another piece to that. And I want it to be known that, so I said I was an SRO for 5 years. We're not out to arrest as many juveniles as we can or anything like that. We had a lot of gangs with the school that I was an SRO at, and just so you know, I have 3 daughters, but I have an adopted son. He was a gang member in our school. And as the SRO, I gave him the opportunity for a somewhat diversion. Basically, came from a family that didn't speak English. He was a leader of the gang, and he basically was told, hey, I want to, him and his sister would run around, running amok in our city. And I said to him, he said he was going to be not graduate. And so I said, come in my office every day after school. Said, the only thing I ask of you is you never lie to me. If you have an appointment with me, you make sure you tell me before the appointment. It's the only thing I ever ask. I'm never going to tell you how to get out of something. I'll tell you how to work through it. I offered that to many kids. He chose to. He now has a master's degree and works for a city. His high school sweetheart, and his son is my grandson. I trust him more with my house and my guns than I do most people. So there are opportunities for diversion to make a really big difference. Okay? Everybody, so many kids had that opportunity. He's the one that took me up on it. And so these kids can be worked with. What mattered to him is that he didn't know me from Adam, and I gave him that opportunity. I even went to the judge because he owed $2,400, which could have been $1 million to his family. And I asked for those to be converted into community service hours, which were then the hours he spent doing extra classes to be able to graduate. So there are ways that these things and community members and people can help. But we don't see that hardly anymore, and it's gone away. So those are big pieces that we're not just law enforcement. Everybody thinks we're out to get these kids. We're not. We want to help. But there has to be opportunities for us to do it as well. So that's just another piece. So just so you know where we're coming from as far as officers, they all have children, almost every single one of them. They care what happens with these kids. We don't just see, oh, you committed a crime. We try and have these conversations. We try and give them to where it's diversion. We want to make sure all the, I's are dotted and the T's are crossed when we're making these reports. That's why we try and get the parents. But we need the parents also to communicate with us what's happening. And so the other part is, the big part about the laws changing and the detention. When we do make arrests sometimes, because of the way the facilities are with juvenile detention now, the news that came out in the report of them being arrested. We had some circumstances where there was a fight. We know who that kid is, you know his name, how come he's running around? Just because there's probable cause, we can call the prosecutor's office and they will not hold them if it's just a physical fight. There's no great bodily injury, which means broken bones or something like that. They're not going to keep them. Even if I take them down to juvenile, they will turn us away. So there's certain things we can and cannot do. And then the other part to that, we did have a robbery
Okay, let me jump in real quick on that. Just to clarify something, the chief is absolutely correct. For many offenses, if they arrest a juvenile and present the juvenile to the detention facility, the child will not be accepted. What I want to clarify is that's not my decision. That's not my office. So to give you an understanding of how juvenile detention works, our King County Juvenile Detention Facility, and actually every detention facility that every county operates, the law says that that is run by Superior Court. So that is the King County Superior Court judges, all right? So the judges are the ones who make the determination about the policies for admission into juvenile detention. And then ultimately, when we charge a kid, it's the judges who decide if a kid is in detention or a kid is out. It's not my office. We make recommendations, but it's the judges, right? And so the courts have instituted something called a detention intake criteria. So the easiest way to say that is they've come up with a list. If a juvenile is being presented for any crime that's on this list, then they get in the door. And if it's a crime that's not on that list, they don't get in the door, okay? And a really easy way to say that is that there are very few misdemeanor offenses that get a kid into the juvenile detention facility.
Part of it's our capacity, right? Because I mean that.
It's not capacity, yeah.
But well, you only have 110 beds, so it's.
Well, yeah, if we accepted every kid presented, yeah, we would have a capacity issue. But going back to what I was saying, there's a lot of good policy around why we do that, okay? Because you really don't want a kid who stole a candy bar sharing a dorm room with a kid charged with murder. So it's those sorts of ideas that we're trying to juggle here. And so that's kind of the reasoning and sort of the facts around that.
The reason I was getting at that is those juveniles that were arrested for robbery, also, which sounds like it's a really big deal, and it is, because they snatched a phone, but they didn't beat somebody up, he didn't get all injured, it's great bodily harm, there's other things that are in the criteria that go along with that. But he was booked into the juvenile detention center, they were back home in Issaquah that night. So just so you have an understanding, even though we take them out of the space, sometimes that doesn't, it's not a long-term problem. And some of the perception is that we didn't do anything, and because they see them the next day, but that's not the case. There's certain circumstances and processes that we have to still follow.
Yeah, let me add context to that. So even with the detention intake criteria, once a kid gets in the door, the law requires that they have a hearing with the judge within 24 hours for the judge to make a determination on probable cause, meaning a judge, while the police can arrest someone because they believe there's enough probable cause to detain that person, the law requires that then the judge reviews the information and they themselves decide, okay, there's enough evidence to say this kid committed a crime and they're going to stay in detention. Now, after that 24 hours, within 72 hours of their detention, they get a hearing to see if detention needs to continue, okay? So even if the chief and their folks arrest a juvenile for armed robbery, let's just say, that kid might stay in after 24 hours because the judge is like, okay, there's probable cause, but then within 72 hours, the judge might have a lot of information that's presented to the judge where they decide, okay, it's in the best interest of this young person and the community that maybe they go home, whether it's outright release or electronic home monitoring or something like that. But I want to also be very clear, just because a kid comes back into your community after an event doesn't mean that my office isn't doing something. So as you know, many people are charged with crimes, but they're still walking out there because they're just accusations, they're allegations. I still have to prove a crime beyond a reasonable doubt for us to get a conviction. So that's the part of the due process that we're talking about. I think that's, yeah.
And the biggest thing is that what I'm trying to get across for Mr. Hung and myself is that we're not making excuses. We just want you to know the process, and we need you guys to be part of this solution to help us in notifying us when things are going, having an issue. We're happy to even, I've reached out to different groups in the area, the community center, that we have officers that are happy to go, even if kids are nervous or scared because we're in uniform, they'll go in plain clothes, they'll play basketball with kids, they'll hang out with kids, they'll show, try and have communication, so they're showing that they're human, right? And so sometimes building those relationships are helpful. It used to be when I first started here, they had pizza with a cop at the high school. I mean, those are different things where they can come and ask questions, they can come and just have some insight a little bit, or even just have a one-on-one. So it's not that we're making excuses. I want you guys to all know the process, and then we also want to know and be able to, number one, answer questions as well, but also to know there's other solutions and things that we're willing to do. Yes?
Yeah, I had a question. In terms of like what makes you decide if they, go into a detention center, like for repeat offenders, are there like 3 strike rules? I mean, where is this criteria? Who's making the decision? Do we know?
Yeah. So you use the term 3 strikes. I want to try my best to really get down to what all that means in Washington State and legally. So Washington State does have a 3 strikes law. It does not apply to juveniles. And I'm going to say thankfully, because whatever you think about 3 strikes, the idea that we're going to incarcerate someone for the rest of their life is a big
Well,
deal.
I mean it more just,
more general,
like what
right.
more general, not literally 3 strikes, but,
Right.
At what point do you guys see a pattern of,
Sure.
wow, this individual is, a threat to their other students at their school and in their community?
Absolutely. So I think, from my perspective, I really do believe that many young people make mistakes that end up being crimes. And then I think when they get arrested by police, come to my attention, see a judge, a lot of those kids just needed that experience to then stop doing it. But absolutely, there are the kids who, notwithstanding this mean prosecutor saying, charging them with a crime, and then a judge saying, I'm going to lock you in detention because of what you did, and then the judge takes a risk and lets them out because they showed some progress, and then when that kid comes back on a similar offense or more serious offense, then my red flags all go off. That's a young person who we need some other different intervention, and diversion is not really the answer. And so in those cases, my office will generally charge those cases, and then we'll go from there. But what I will tell you is like I said, I've been doing this 25 years. If I wish I could sit here and tell you that what I do as a prosecutor solves all these problems, because I can tell you, doing this 25 years, I've sent people to prison for decades, and they've come out and killed people. So it's not something that is going to solve everything, but at the same time, I've also seen young people who now are my friends, who they're not so young anymore, but when they were young, went to institutions and now are doing amazing things. And so I think there's no easy way to solve all of these problems, but I guess I'm talking way too much, using way too many words to say what I think you want to hear, which is we take repeat offenders very, very seriously, because those are kids that aren't getting it.
But just because it gets reported, just because there's an assault,
Yeah.
we don't get all it has to get to him. And not every assault that happens on campus, or campuses, like you said, there's the discretion of each jurisdiction, whether they report that. That's why it's important that if it happens to your child, make sure it's being reported, because then that process is documented.
And one other thing, I do want to, there is a distinct difference between an assault versus the term of art we use in our world is mutual combat, meaning people who come together and decide we want to fight each other. I'm not so old that I don't remember that that's part of growing up. People take out their aggression and they get together and fight each other. I 14-year-old and also having been a teenager myself, we're not the most accurate reporters to our parents, right? And so that's why it's vitally important that the police are able to do their job, because oftentimes you also have one group of kids who are going to say one thing because they're trying to, you know, help their friend, and then there's always the other side of the story, and then law enforcement may do their job perfectly and get all these great statements, and then it comes to me and I'm like, you got one side saying one thing and another side saying another thing, and like I need evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to charge someone, and so my office might be like, okay, something happened here, but I can't prove that an assault occurred. And then again, going back to anyone who has concerns about the way my office handled something, we will document all of that in a memo that is publicly available, and everyone can criticize our decision or look at how we analyze the case.
I hear you talking about stealing wood and kids doing things for social media, but there's some really scary things happening at the school, and the kids are scared. Some kids are like, and I would like to know, like, what's your relationship with the school district? If a kid is doing something on campus, are they calling you? Do you feel comfortable to come in? What's your relationship like with the school district?
Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's some.
So,
I'd like to echo this lady's comments. There are some really scary things happening, and I don't know the line between when you get involved in that.
And it's not stealing wood, and
I don't know how many of you have seen the video, but I have. The victims lives directly across the street from me. It wasn't some organized fun thing for social media.
Right.
and I understand that, and when, like I said, we have a victim and we have a willing participant who will make statements and be able for us to interview and get that information, and so we can take the report and forward that, then yes, we do every time. If we don't get the information, let's say you even told me and brought the video in. If that parent or child is unwilling to fill out that documentation so I can move that on to the prosecutor, there's nothing I can do about that.
Have you ever been stopped from coming into the school?
I understand, but we don't, I get it.
It's a district issue. I just want to be really clear that there's a violence issue at the school. And the issue, and it may not even rise to a level of an actual crime. Maybe it is mutual combat, but there is a violence issue, and our kids don't feel safe. We need intervention from the district to help our kids feel safe.
Are you allowed to come into the school? Do you feel comfortable from the school district coming in?
What do you define coming in?
Let's say that a
I've
child.
asked to do a canine search for drugs. Outside in the parking lot, here and at the high school, I've asked to do one in around just the locker space where there's no expectation of privacy, and I've been declined all 8 years I've been here. We have to check in at the office, and we've got multiple, like I said, I think last year we had over 17 search warrants to get information on kids that have had violent crimes committed. And so we do everything we can in going through the process to work with the district the best we can.
Thank you, Sharon. That's really important, because I think that probably sensing and strong, you're just trusting.
Yeah.
The needs you have. This is not a safe environment for our kids right now. It really isn't, and our kids don't feel safe, and they don't feel safe in raising it either. It is the opposite. What's happening?
Can I just say something? I'm not discounting anything you guys are saying, but I'm telling you, us back here, we're like, we don't even know what you're talking about. Like, truly, my daughter, she's running for ASB president. Like, she loves this school, so I don't know. She's never, and I don't disagree.
Who loves ASB. She's a straight A student, okay? She tells me she's afraid to use the bathroom during the day. She said the only time I'm comfortable doing it is at lunch when I can have my friend or my sister, she's a twin, come with me. She said, any other time I'm afraid to go in there. There are so many kids that are truant, that are in the bathrooms. It's this unsafe, she's a quiet little girl. It's not like she's getting into tussles with people, but she does not feel safe. They're always using the term, those kids might jump me, or this or that. So it is happening, and
I'm not disagreeing,
you know,
I'm just telling you, like,
that's not okay that she doesn't feel safe to go to the bathroom.
I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just letting you know, a lot of us parents don't hear any of these things. So I just wanna say that I'm really sorry that your kids are feeling, but I'm also letting you know that it's not happening to every kid. So when it's like, it's so unsafe here, I mean, I'm telling you, I grew up in Yakima. You wanna know scary, you can go to Yakima. Okay, I was scared for my life every single day.
Let's talk openly.
So-
I'm just talking protectively of my own children.
Totally,
And
I
when my
just
children are
think that
scared,
it's, when we're making a thing
then I'm
saying that
going to
this
be
school is
scared
not
too.
safe, I think that's a blanket statement, which is not
And
true.
I will accept that. If 90% of the kids are happy, bless you, okay? But there's a lot of kids though, and there's a lot of kids that don't feel safe. So good for you, but that is something that needs to be addressed within this school. Seriously, guys, and I have to tell you, I'm not even sure the teachers feel safe.
So I'm gonna intervene here for a little bit. So we need to be really careful. We can't boil the ocean. That makes sense to everybody. We're all going to have certain situations or issues or concerns that we have. And what we really need to try to do, or what I've been hearing, so we have these two industry level experts here, and they're telling us, okay, here's what's going to happen when A, B, and C happens. But they're also giving us the tools as a community to help A, B, and C not happen. So we have Chief Swan that is telling us, you know, we had a point blank question, what is the relationship with the schools? Well, we had the Key County prosecutor telling us it's a little tough. If they have to write a warrant to get me information, then for me as a parent, that makes me kind of think, maybe not great. And maybe that door needs to be opened. I don't know, I don't work for the district, I'm a parent, that's not my job to figure that out. I think the other thing we need to be careful of as a community is that we don't devour one another. You know, we have a parent back here that says, I never heard about this. You're not alone. I've had other parents that have said that as well. And overwhelmingly, I've had kids at this school for 5 years. I've been the PTA president for 3 of them. And I can tell you that it's not the whole school. But what I can tell you as a parent, in my opinion, even though it may be a small percentage, that small percentage does a lot. And for kids, when they see these things, or they experience these things, or whatever, the thing that worries me is that now they just have stopped talking about it. So it's just kind of become common. That's the thing that worries me. But the other thing I think we need to be really, really careful about is we need to make sure we're connecting the dots where they need to be connected. So we can't say at the school level, oh, they're not doing their job, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I presented some data points that shows if we compare Issaquah Middle School to our other middle schools in the district, we consistently have the highest behaviors by a lot. From 2018, this is not a post-COVID thing. But the interesting thing is when you look at that data, the other middle schools have been able to turn it around. We haven't. Even though we've done some really amazing things at this school, I don't want the impression to be either that this is a terrible place, because it's not, and there's people that work really, really hard here to make it a good, safe place.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. And by the way, you mentioned, it is not my intent to bow or Volvo or anybody else's.
Yeah.
I think as a parent, I owe it to speak what I'm experiencing.
I agree.
And so, seriously, honestly, if that came across in any manner disrespectful.
No, and I don't
you
mean
know,
to be disrespectful
I
either.
apologize.
I'm just stating,
But
I've
I'm
never
with
seen
you, by
any.
the way. And here's the other thing. I firmly believe that every teacher in this school is brilliant at their job and wants to do the most amazing job that they can do to educate their children, which is what they train so hard to do.
I agree.
I worry that they're not able to do so because they're so conflicted with other distractions, taking care of the safety and well-being, trying to take I agree with you. And by the way, I should introduce myself. My name's Joe. I'm a retiree. I've worked in the aerospace industry as an executive for 45 years. But I love data. And I looked at the data. And the data is shouting. There is a problem in the Issaquah Middle School. It is very clear. The detention rates or the reprimand rates or whatever how you want to call it are higher. The grade rates are lower. The attendance rates are lower. The diversity in terms of social economical backgrounds is also markedly different to any other school within the district. And I wonder if this school is being used for some sort of experiment, and if it is, it's going terribly wrong.
I hope it's not being used for an experiment, because I got two of my kids in here. Yes.
Hello, my name's Mike. I'm glad some of you haven't witnessed some of the tragedies going on at school. I'm grateful for your children not to see that. I have seen it many times. I used to pick my kid up every day at school. I have seen fights break out. I have seen children that I've known from the neighborhood, children I've coached that have to be crying, looking for an adult to be present because there's problems going on. I've seen many kids running around with their iPhones with a big smile on their face, really excited about filming crimes. So a couple questions. One, if a 13-year-old beats up a 13-year-old, is it a crime? Is that something that could be prosecuted? Or if a 13-year-old beats up a 13-year-old over and over again, can police, it sounds like this Issaquah School District for some reason doesn't support police officers, which I'm not sure why, but is that a crime if it happens?
It's not mutual combat, and yes, the person was defending themselves, or in fact someone, as you say, beat them up or assaulted them, and it's a repeated thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a crime. If they, there's a lot of different pieces to it, but yes, and as long as we know about it, then, but that's the hard part. Someone has to report that they have to be okay to have their voice and say, hey, there's a problem.
So being that there's cameras everywhere in the school, there's vape detectors, I mean, like there's all sorts of things, right, to keep everyone safe. The child's assaulted, and you come to the school and say, hey, school, I need footage of this kid getting assaulted at the school. You have to have a warrant. The school won't cooperate with you. Is that correct?
Correct.
That is ridiculous.
Let me say a couple of things. I agree, yes, that scenario you talked about, that is a crime and it can be prosecuted. Now, I also want to be clear, like, and this isn't probably helping the situation because I'm sure parents here are frustrated saying like, why can't the school like be more involved in helping with an investigation? I'm not here to throw shade at that because I also understand there's a lot of complexities in running a school and there are lawyers who are advising them and that's why they're taking that action. And so I'm not here to say one way or another, but in the situation that you described, you know, with getting a warrant, does it slow things down a little? We do warrants all the time, like we can still do it. It doesn't preclude us from pursuing the case, and it sounds like the Issaquah Police Department is committed to doing that. The other thing that parents need to understand is if your child is a victim of a crime and you feel like something happened on school campus that you want addressed, you don't need the school to report it. You can take your child or pick up the phone and call 911 and the chief and their team will come and take a report and they'll gather as much evidence as they can. They might interview other kids to get more information. If they think the school might have evidence that can help, you know, give us more evidence for the crime, whether it's surveillance video or whatever, we can work with them to get a search warrant. So just the fact that the school is not reporting it or helping you report doesn't mean that you can't also report it to the police and action.
And to be clear, just they're not doing it to necessarily be, I don't want it to sound like they're being defiant just to be anti-police. They're doing it to protect all the other kids that also might be in that video also, which is a whole thing with redaction and that FERPA that you're also talking about. And that's another piece to this. It's not just that they're, oh, I'm anti-police, because that's not the case. They're trying to protect everybody else that's also involved and kind
just in my experience, if let's say tomorrow the school district decide, okay, we're not gonna make police get search warrants anymore, and we'll streamline that process a little more, I don't think that's gonna materially change what you guys are telling us about right now. I'll just put that out there. It might make our lives easier, but the same issues that you're dealing with are still gonna be there. Now, with that being said, that's kind of the negative of what I was saying. The positive, if this might help you on it, I don't want to sound dismissive. I just want to provide some context. You know, I've worked with a lot of school districts. I've seen a lot of crime on campus. The nice thing, the encouraging thing I wanted to share with this community is you're not drinking from a fire hydrant, right? It does sound like there are families who have children, thankfully, who are having a very positive experience here, and there are families who are clearly traumatized and want help for their children because their children don't feel safe. And then I look at this room of all these like caring parents. I've been to schools where their PTA might be 2 people, okay? Right, and so there is a lot of, you know, passion and care in this community. You are way ahead of everybody else, and so, like, I feel like this is a problem that the grown-ups in the room can come together and help really solve and make better. And I just want to share that. This gentleman has had his hand up looking at me. I'm going to make an executive decision and let you ask the question.
First, my name is David Marshall. I work at the YWCA Family Village Issaquah. I'm a youth and family advocate. I work with a lot of the students from the high school, or a few of the students from the high school as well as the middle school. And sitting here as somebody who works directly with a lot of the kids, it's even kids who I don't work with, who have taken a trust and an interest in me because of the role I'm playing in their peers' lives. Unfortunately, some of you as parents aren't aware of what's really going on. As it was mentioned by Chief Swan, a lot of you guys as kids, I'm sorry, please don't be offended. They are going to these fights willingly. Unfortunately, IMS as well as IHS has a fight club. Unfortunately. And they're going to these fights willingly, and when they lose, now they're playing victim. I'm sorry to inform you guys of that, but this is what is taking place. Now, before we all start clashing with one another, as a community, it's far more important for you guys to communicate your differences with one another so you can get an understanding of what's actually going on with your kids. If you guys combat with each other, you're never gonna find a solution. The chief can only do so much, the prosecutor can only do so much, the teachers can only do so much. However, as the parents in the community, you guys have the most power. And you guys have to figure out a way to come together and come in tune and work with your children in a way that can reduce these situations.
If you don't mind, I'm sorry to be rude, but you didn't see the video. My son was not a really.
Are you sure I haven't saw the video?
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not saying.
Let me just put it in context because it was particularly personal, and actually, as somebody who trusted the system and trusted the schooling, to witness the video, I was deeply, deeply shocked that it actually happened in the context of school. So this is no social media stunt or whatever. This is happening in the school. Just so we're very clear. The other thing is, please don't take my passion as conflict. I want the best possible educational experience for my son, and I want our teachers to do what it is that they actually qualified themselves to be able to go and do. And that will not happen unless if we just ignore what's actually going on. I'm sorry to be very clear with you, and please don't confuse my passion as conflict. I don't, but it's not about social media in my particular context, okay? It is about my son being scared in a schooling environment that he shouldn't actually feel that.
And I understand.
It's quite simple.
And I wasn't speaking on your situation directly. I'm not speaking, let's be clear. Before anybody thinks that I have a negative position, my son was murdered in 2020. So if you want to talk about scared, I can tell you a different level of being scared. The young man who murdered my son walks the streets every day. And I have a daughter. I have 2 daughters that are school-age children. So if you want to talk about scared, here, so this is where I'm coming from, though. We don't wanna attack the chief, we don't wanna attack the prosecutor.
I've not attacked.
So I think we should really take to heart what Jimmy said. The most important thing is you're here. You're here, and if you're here, that means you care about what's happening with these kids. So let's get to the next step of what can we do as a community. It is no secret that there's stuff that happens at our middle school. It is no secret that the data bears it out. It is no secret that the staff are exhausted, but we also have some of the most amazing staff in the district because they don't give up. Yeah.
Can we save a few minutes for parents?
Yeah, we can save a few minutes for parents to share their.
To share, because I think
Yeah.
some parents came today to
Yeah,
share what's
so we just need to be really careful when we're sharing our experiences, because we'll be here till midnight, number one. Number two, we want to be really careful in that we're not saying the same thing 50 different ways. I don't want to silence anybody by any means, because we do have people here from the district that I think need to hear the lived experience of our kids. And so, yeah, I'm okay with that. I'll go ahead and share this. So we do have an issue in our school. So the school district has a policy, and it's called the HIB policy, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Does everybody know what the HIB is? Raise your hand if you do not know what the HIB is. Okay. If you go to the Issaquah School District website, type in HIB in the search engine, and it pulls up harassment, intimidation, and bullying. There is a policy and there is a procedure how that is carried out, and there is a form that you can fill out if you want to make a report of a harassment, intimidation, or bullying, and it defines what that is. So just go to the website and you can find it there. When you fill out that report, the problem is, in the small print, it says, if the report is made anonymously, they can't move forward. And so one of the barriers or hurdles that we have at our school that I have heard from many, many parents is kids are scared to say anything because some vernacular we have at our school is everybody's getting jumped, even though the poor principals tried to ban the word jump. Now they say bounce, and I don't know what else they say. So he has banned cell phones, okay? So these are positive things that are happening. Okay, we ban the cell phones, fine. We know the kids want to film themselves fighting, fine, ban the cell phones. Has that helped? I think so. Would you agree with that, staff? Yeah, a thumbs up from the staff, that has helped. Okay, so that's one positive thing. Now let's connect the dots. What are the dots? Is it that, oh, at the school level, they're just not doing a good job? Don't everybody speak up at once. Yes?
What year was it that the boundaries were changed? Because
2021 when they came back.
Because it seems like everyone here is working so hard and they need more help. And that we have the students with the most needs coming to this school, and they're not at fault. These kids aren't at fault for coming here. Right. But this staff needs more help.
Well, I don't know about that. So something that has come up a lot this year that has been discussed is, so I was on that boundary committee years ago when the boundaries were changed. And I was the rep for IMS. One of the things that we were really passionate about was we wanted to make sure that our kiddos that were most at risk had access, like we call it the downtown corridor. We wanted to make sure that they had a walkability to school and that they had access to those community resources like the food bank and different things that are downtown. When we were given the springboard proposal from the district, it was suggested that we have Sunset Elementary School, IBE, and Clark all come to this school. Ultimately, that is what was decided. Prior to that, Cougar Ridge used to come to this school. So Cougar Ridge went to Cougar Mountain and Sunset came here. Now, at the time when I was on the boundary committee, and I do not want to say there's a straight line between poverty and crime because there's not always a straight line. However, Sunset Elementary School we knew was about 9 or 10% free and reduced at the time. Sunset is now, what, 23%, I think? And that literally happened overnight. And so we now have the 3 poorest schools all feed into our middle school. We also see discipline data from our feeder pattern schools. The discipline data is higher. Of course it is. You have kids coming out of trauma and all kinds of different kinds of things. So what are we as a community going to do? Are we just gonna complain? Or are we gonna figure out what to do?
Question the boundaries.
Question the boundaries, exactly.
Question the boundaries.
Yep.
I'm looking at this data. I believe that the Issaquah Middle School has been overloaded as some part of some social experiment that's actually taken on the burden of what I would consider to be complicated children and disadvantaged children. I look at all of the other schools, their attendance records are not consistent with their rates, their grades are not consistent. We've done something to this schooling system that's broken. And I think it's unfair on the children, and I think it's unfair on the staff.
I have a question for you. When we were talking about, I think it was you that was talking about mandatory reporting.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, so if something happens and a kid is abused at a school, whether that be a violent assault or a rape or whatever it may be, is Issaquah School District reporting that to you? And I have a follow-up question too.
Sure, I think, I can't answer that last part of your question. What I can tell you is every employee of this school district is a mandatory report. There are legal obligations that are put on them to have to report certain things. Now, I don't think that, kids assaulting each other or having incident of assault is what the mandatory reporting is we're talking about, like child abuse, neglect, sexual abuse by adults against children, those sorts of things. So if your question is like, if they see one kid assaulting another kid, are they mandatorily required to report that? I don't think that's what the law is contemplating. I don't know, is that
That is kind of what,
Okay.
I mean, my
Yeah.
son was extremely violently assaulted last Tuesday. And this was not a fight, and this was not but it was also recorded on social media and shared with the entire school body. So every time my son gets re-victimized, every time someone wants to bring that up.
No, I'm so
And this was something that I went to the police about, not your police department. I went to the police about, and it's because it's unincorporated King County. And I was, for lack of a better term, mostly convinced to try to not file charges because it would go nowhere.
Did it happen here in Issaquah though, in school?
It happened at Pacific Cascade Middle School.
Let me be as crystal clear as I can to this room, and if you could kindly share this with any other parent that might have this misperception. My office, like I said, every case sent to us, we take very seriously. We make a decision that is publicly available. So if there is a law enforcement officer who tells you that the prosecutor's office won't do anything or doesn't care about this, I would take exception to that. Now, what I will be also honest about is sometimes law enforcement, and I'm not saying the chief here, I understand the dynamic. Sometimes law enforcement want us to do something different. Maybe they want us to charge a kid when we might choose to divert, or maybe they want us to hold a kid in detention longer when a judge is going to let them out. So they may disagree with what ends up happening, but I want to be very clear that we take it very seriously. And there's never a situation where a case comes to my office and we're like, oh, no big deal. We're not going to do anything.
Thank you for speaking to that. And I think too, it makes it, because things like this are not being mandatorily reported, it makes an extremely heavy burden on that parent and that kid to come back to school every day. Even if everyone in their school that they come in contact with says, you need to press charges, this kid is dangerous, I'm afraid, other friends are afraid, press charges, please. I mean, I don't think it's fair, I know this is not the system that you
created. But it seems like maybe even that could be something where maybe at some point they could say, if a assault, if a rape, if something happens, like we should be reporting that and we should be freely sharing that, so no one feels that they're not heard and that their concerns should be what I feel like swept under the rug.
So what I'm hearing is your concern that you feel it's not being reported at the school?
To law enforcement.
Law enforcement, okay. Well, and I can tell you, probably not unless it's really severe because of FERPA. That's what I've been told. But that does not preclude you from going to the police, and that was amazing advice that he gave you. If they tell you, no, probably should push a little harder.
Yeah, if they're telling you you won't do it, I would go back and insist that they take a report.
And if not, that's tough.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry to hear that your child is going through that. I understand how the harm is magnified when it's shared on social media.
Exactly, and we're spreading it around. We're not addressing the hurt of the student that caused the assault, and then we're also dismissing the victim that this happened to.
Well, and I think that's district policies, and so then we're out of the water with these two, but this is where
I just
saying,
want
yeah,
people to
connect
know
the dots,
that
right?
that's what's happening.
Right, and so if that's a district policy that is, people don't agree with, then how do you change that?
Yeah, it's for an incredibly violent assault, and the school even called it a violent assault, or an assault. I watched the video myself. It is horrific. It is horrific what has happened here.
Yeah.
That we need to seriously look at what we're doing, because that was a 1.5-day suspension. And I got the feeling that was even deemed excessive. And he has a concussion, so.
And I think that's a hard one for parents to, I've had many parents tell me, I've seen it myself, where because they share everything on social media. And 9 times out of 10, it ends up hitting my inbox. Because the kids will share it, the parents will find it. I mean, they used to have, I don't know if they still have it, but on Instagram they had 4 or 5 different accounts called IMS fights. And there were kids that would just fight. Some of them were staged fights, some of them were actual fights, but that was
And this wasn't a fight, this was an assault, like, you
Right.
didn't even know this was coming.
But what I'm saying is the punishment,
Yeah.
that parents often don't feel like the punishment was harsh enough, or it didn't fit the crime, or, whatever, then that's, there's only so much the school can tell us because of FERPA. Like, are there other extenuating circumstances? Is that kid on a 504 plan or an IEP? There's so many things. And like Mr. Hahn said, the district is, they have attorneys that tell them what should happen and stuff, but as a community, if we're all saying the same thing, then maybe we all need to say the same thing to the right people. So if we feel like the discipline's not happening in a way that is preventing these things from happening, then what's the next step? Yes, please.
What message are we sending to the community, to the kids who are offending, and to the rest of the population that just wants to go to school in safety and in peace? What message are we sending if we're not actually, if there are no adults in the room who are willing to, provide consequences, meaningful consequences for, horrific events, or just even the common day-to-day stuff. I just don't see the discipline within, and I think that's at the district level. The school's hands are tied, and that's, as parents, I think need to come together. I think you're absolutely right. As a community, we need to come together, and I don't know what it would take. We have folks from the district who are here. I would love to know what steps, as parents, we can take to bring this to your attention so that we can make change.
At this point, I do want to say there is a lot of state law related to discipline. So I don't know that's your school board that you need to talk to, it's your state legislators. There was a change in the state law regarding discipline, I think in 2018, and it has impacted a lot of what we can do, so.
How is the district interpreting the state law? Is it?
As it's written, and there are what's called WACs, Washington Advisory Codes, that dictate to the district what it is that we can do discipline-wise.
Why are we the only district then that,
Right.
like, why is it that the police can't?
That to me, okay.
Why are we the only district that has that?
That's not discipline. And I will say that much to what the chief said, giving out, oh, I'm sorry, did you say reporting to? Or giving the information?
Not just giving the information, but the police, the chief of police has offered their services to the school to sniff for drugs. You know, not even inside the school, but in, you know, on school grounds. I mean, I think, I'm hearing that there are steps that the police could take to make the school safer, but we're the only district that doesn't allow that to happen. Is that true or not?
Well, I can't say we're the only district, because I can't speak for other districts right now, as far as that goes. I can speak to, what we've done and attempted here. There's certain things, and like I said, they're trying to protect, their laws, they're talking about FERPA, they're talking about other children as well, and trying to be the guardian ad litem for all the kids that are on campus. And to be fair, who's to say that, again, I'm all for the drug dogs, and even if they didn't find anything, it makes the kids go, oh my gosh, right? I mean,
Yeah,
but the reality is it fair if a kid drove their parents' car and their parents, I mean, there's also some of these other pieces that are all going corporate.
I love our staff, our teachers, our principals, our assistant principals. They never swore oath to the Constitution, but I did. And so when you start talking about due process and constitutional rights, because asking for a warrant is a constitutional right of those people. So even if they are the ones being disciplined. So we have just a disagreement in philosophy there. I am a staunch constitutional rights person, and so just being able to say, oh, we're gonna cooperate and we're gonna let police just come in, we'll just hand over the tape. I think the school is doing its due diligence to protect the rights of all students, even the ones that aren't necessarily on that tape.
I have a question for you. I received some information that there's been times when kids are caught with illegal items at school, and you guys' standards are to send them home and turn those items over to the police instead of seeking for the police to receive the information so they can move forward with some type of prosecution or positive preventative action. How is state legislature at fault for that?
And that I don't have an answer for that, and I don't know that situation, so I would not speak to that at all.
No, we have in our district, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we have a zero tolerance with drugs and weapons, that kind of thing for, no?
Again, I don't have the specifics in front of me, but staff might know that deal with it every day. And to be clear, when it comes to drugs and alcohol, I mean, I'm the executive director of Influence of Choice. We are a youth substance use prevention. It's the heart of my work on a day-to-day basis. So I get frustrated as well when I find out, oh, if a kid's caught with a vape pen, it gets confiscated and they get sent back to class. And I've been very clear, we're actually trying to pilot at least some type of diversion, online diversion programs for them when they get caught. So definitely have a heart for trying to keep kids from using substances on school camps. So yeah, if there's ways that we can improve that, I'm all for it.
So there's been a little bit of like miscommunication with some of those types of things. We do follow discipline laws for the state of Washington that we all have to follow as a school. And at the same time, every single time something is reported to us, we investigate every situation and give consequences. Every single time. That's why if you look at the discipline data, our data is so high because I report every single little thing that happens because I want it to be documented that this kid vaped and this kid was in a fight and this kid was aggressive and this kid pushed some other kid. We document because I'm not skirting those issues under the rug. If you've come to any PTSA meeting before, if you've come to any Java with Jay-Z before, I explain every single one of these situations to parents and say, I am trying this, and this, and here's what I can share. Every fight and every situation that happens, I tell parents, this is what the school can do and the consequences that we're going to give. If you want to go report to the police, you have absolutely every right to do that. I do say there are going to be hoops you're going to have to jump through because unfortunately, because of FERPA laws, we cannot communicate out that information. You have to have that information when you go to report that stuff to the police, or they're going to have to do a search warrant to get that information from us. Several of you I know, because we have dealt together with a lot of these sad situations that have happened, right? I have partnered with you. I have explained all of these things to all of you. There are always consequences. It is not just oh, they were in a fight. I don't just forget about it and just say that nothing's going to happen. Every single time we have done that. I came into this school 3 years ago. There were kids running in the hallways and climbing through windows and things like that too. It has been a huge change from that behavior 3 years ago. We're the only middle school that has an MTSS specialist. We have extra people that are here to support than any other building. We still have a lot of issues and still require a lot of support. We do have the largest number of discipline that's reported. We have the largest number of MLL. We have the largest number of free and reduced lunches. We have the largest number of SPED. We have the largest number of 504. We have probably the most diverse school in the entire district in this one building. Absolutely. So all of those things you have heard is absolutely 100% true. But hear me say, we partner with police as much as we possibly can. Whenever there's an issue, they are 2 blocks away. I call if there's ever an issue or a concern, and they are quick to report. I have an SRO on my campus daily. Also partners with them for everything that we are allowed to report to them. Assaults and things like that, unfortunately, are not mandatory reporting, and we cannot report that stuff to like CPS and things like that. We report all of the things as mandatory reporters. All of our staff do that when there is concerns of abuse, sexual assault, and things like that. All of that stuff does get reported. Drugs and alcohol and vapes, again, we have to confiscate, and we don't just send a kid back to class. Depending on what the vape and stuff like that has, we do confiscate those things, and we do turn that stuff over to the police. Okay? But again, trust me, the discipline laws have changed. I was at Issaquah High prior to coming here. Again, I was there for several years before the discipline laws changed. We used to have, if a kid got caught with alcohol, they used to be suspended for 10 days. Reducible down to 3 if they did a drug and alcohol assessment. That is no longer the case with the discipline laws. They are back in school tomorrow. So what is the deterrent from a kid from getting caught for something? Right, and that's the hard part, is we do our darndest, right, in order to protect all of your kids. And I need all of you as well when it comes to things like walkabout and volunteers here on campus. I can tell you there's several parents here that do that, and they help us at lunchtime. It's awesome. We love it. Please do that, right? Even at your own schools, if you're not here at Issaquah Middle, maybe you're at Issaquah High, or maybe at elementary, or maybe do that. We need more adults because that's what really will help our schools, as well as possibly boundary changes. Please don't hear that we don't want more support. We will take even more that the district has already given us because of all of the needs that we have for our kids.
For my part, I don't think, I certainly am not criticizing the staff, the professionalism of the staff in the school in any manner whatsoever. In fact, to be quite honest, I just think you guys have been put in very difficult circumstances. Very difficult circumstances. And I don't know, what can we do to help you avoid being in those circumstances?
There's just a lot. I mean, there's a lot, right? There's a lot. I mean, for me, there's lots of things. I think a boundary change would help. I don't think that that's necessarily the answer. We are still going to have fights in our district, right? And again, a lot of those places will still feeder back over here, right to our neighbor, right next door, right? So even if we reboundary at the middle school level, the high school would have to do something similar, right? I think the discipline laws would have to change. Again, there is talk of that happening at the legislative level with the WACs and things like that she's referencing, right? At the same time, we also need parent support because again, I know I have a son here in the district, and at the same time, I give consequences. My son lost his birthday party last year because he pushed a kid at recess. I'm like, do you know my job? Like, you are not going to push another kid at recess.
Just make them across as judgmental, but this boundary and the way it's all set up, it's sort of like you throw matches in the same room, and I've got to think that we're actually doing those kids a disservice as well.
But the other thing is,
the
it's
better
learned.
you spread them out, the better they're distributed, the better they'll
Yeah.
actually get role model behavior from the other
Yes.
kids. And
But it's also learned behavior, because every once in a while, we do get to get rid of a couple bad behaviors that happen in our school, and unfortunately, other kids rise to that same occasion, and possibly because they've been exposed to it. But we have great kids here. All great kids. We have bad choices and bad behaviors that happen. All of our kids are good kids. They make poor choices and have poor behaviors. However, we do have kids that, again, will push and shove somebody, and then all of a sudden be like, I didn't do anything, and then they get pushed and shoved back, and then the play fighting stuff turns into real fighting. I don't know necessarily about some of the videos and stuff like that about people being willing, but I do know a lot of play fighting, like slap boxing and stuff, starts as play, and then it turns into somebody just got slapped, and they're like, oh, now it's on, and now I'm gonna start pushing and shoving harder, and then the real fighting really does start happening. So, and again, there are other kids that are absolutely victims and absolutely recipients of really bad behavior and poor choices from other kids. But again, we mentioned diversion. Like, I would love to learn more about diversion. I think for a lot of the people I offer it to, their parent or kid have to be willing to be part of it.
Yeah.
And so it's a great program, and I've had a couple kids that take us up on that. But for a kid who really needs it, look around our room right now. A lot of, in my opinion, victims of parents are here. Some of the aggressors' parents are not here. It's predominantly white right now too. That's also not really servicing all of the community we have in this building. We don't have a lot of African American folks here tonight, a lot of Hispanic folks, a lot of our Asian community and stuff too, and mixed races. We have some, but not a lot. And our school is a lot of those other groups. We've got to figure out ways to get them to be part of these conversations. And we have parent meetings, and we have education for the kids, and we have consequences and assemblies, and we've changed things to be tier 1 for all kids. And it's still not enough, right? I have an MTSS specialist who she and I like constantly are like, let's try this, let's try that, let's try ways to motivate kids. And it's still not enough. And I still get kind of like get yelled at by parents, like, what are you gonna do to keep my kids safe? Every day I'm in the hallways, I spend 8 hours in the hallways. I don't get to sit and do my job like every other principal, because I'm still like, okay, get to class, get to class, get to class, get to class. Hey, I'm dancing with kids in the hallway to try to get them to just get out of the classroom. I play like crappy music. I literally like doing dance moves and stuff because they're like, oh my God, he's so weird. And then they move on, right? It's just.
But if you got all the teachers in the room, and they all could express what they wanted to create the environment that they think is appropriate for the kids.
Yes.
What would they ask for that they don't have today?
I think part of it is the fact with discipline laws, we can't just kick kids out. Right? I think back to like my education as when I was growing up. If there was a problem kid, right, with making a poor choice, they were kicked out. We don't have that anymore with the discipline laws. They're often back in school right away, or unfortunately, it's progressive discipline. They're suspended for a day, they're suspended for 2 days, they're suspended for 3 days, but that's multiple opportunities in multiple situations, right? But again, it doesn't feel fair that there was a fight and a kid is back in school tomorrow, that a kid got drunk and all of a sudden is back in school tomorrow. To parents, especially the ones who are the recipients of like these bad behaviors to their kid. Wait a minute, that kid just got into a fight and they're back in school tomorrow. That doesn't feel fair to me, but that's the discipline laws that is happening right now in the state of Washington.
Mark, and this might be more of a question for the board members that are here. I know that there's other districts in the state that are interpreting the same laws differently, and they are taking a harder stance on discipline. And so I guess I would like to challenge the board to take a second look at how those laws are interpreted maybe in other districts and how it's impacting their discipline. Because I know that there's not, other districts in the area are not getting second, third, and fourth. I mean, I've got a friend, his son was choked 2 years ago, and he came home hours later with finger marks on his neck from being choked, and she was back in school the next day. I would also love to hear why we don't have the drug dogs in class. I had a slumber party at my house a couple weeks ago, probably about 10, 12 girls, and they were just like, oh my gosh, there's this guy in my classroom that smells so strongly of pot. Like he sits next to me and he's like, I get sick. He's like, it makes me nauseous, and I've asked my teacher to switch, but she won't let me in, so I still have to sit next to him, and I can't focus. Or another girl got offered weed gummies the other day in the hallway. They sit next to drug dealers in class. Somebody was talking about how he gets raw pot and he makes the joints and he sells them in school. I would love to see laws, and so I don't know if that's like how the interpretation of the Washington state law prevents that from happening.
would say some of those things is about reporting. And again, if you report anonymously, there's not much that staff can do about that, because who are they gonna go to ask those questions?
Okay,
So,
so on that, I mean, if when we're talking about something that we can change, I would so love for our kids to be able to report anonymously and have action taken on that. My kids and every single girl at that slumber party absolutely refuse to report because they are terrified that there will be retaliated.
So I just want to clarify one thing.
Yeah.
Every kid can report anonymously for safety concerns at all schools, and action is absolutely taken with detail. Now, they may have concerns about that, but they can report anonymously. The statement earlier was, can you have a harassment, intimidation, and bullying claim anonymously? That you cannot do, because that is naming a very specific item and personal impact. But on every school site, kids should absolutely be reporting anonymously, and those are 100% followed up on.
Yeah, we investigate across our desk. I can't report back to somebody if all
Right,
of a
but they
sudden
don't
she
know who to
reports me
tell
anonymously
when they fix it.
that there's somebody vaping in the bathroom. We go look and go find out who was vaping in the bathroom, but I can't follow up to be like, hey, guess what? Like, I found out who was vaping because I have nobody to report to. Right? We investigate every situation that comes across our desk. So, I mean, even if it's reported anonymously, don't just go, oh, it's anonymous, we're not going to look at it. We investigate everything. Every single thing that comes across. I just can't report back to somebody with a consequence. Hey, or investigate like what's happening because I have no one to report back to.
But kids are scared to report.
I understand that, and for me, again, I'm a parent in the district, and I've had this exact conversation. Parents have to help, they have to guide, and they have to explain. If you don't feel like your name needs to be associated, you have to use that button and give as much information as possible. Now, again, the problem is, I know they're all investigated, but there is no one to go back to say, hey, we got this claim. So there is that downside, but the parents have to help in that circumstance. They have to.
And I do know that we've had discussions in our homerooms lately with that circle back. So there is this misconception that they don't do anything. That's what we often hear from students is like, I reported and nothing happened. And some of that goes back to FERPA. And I'm not able to go back and say, this is the consequence that I gave that kid or whatever. And so we're working as a staff to figure out how we close that loop with our students so that they can feel safer, and understand that we are doing what we can do to, when they report, to encourage that reporting, because we do have a system that is in place and we do follow up with everything that is reported to us, and we just can't always share the specifics that sometimes kids want to hear. And we hear nothing is happening, and the next thing is sometimes those consequences don't change that student's behavior. So there's what they're saying nothing is happening, but what they mean is the behavior hasn't changed. He's still doing that to me, right? And so that is something that we're working on as well. So it's reported, we investigate it, we take it down whatever channels we need to take it down. We cannot go back and share that information.
I actually think it's the kids think that if they don't report with their name, that you can't take action on it. So I think
So that's a great messaging that we need to, absolutely. And then I just also think that how we frame the nothing is being done is really looking at, okay, well, so that consequence didn't change that kid's behavior. He's still doing this to me, and that's a fair point too. And, you know, I can't force a kid to change their behavior. I can continue to give consequences and communicate with their family, and we can continue to work with our tiered systems to try different things. I mean, we're trying everything under the sun. Yeah.
Can I interrupt real quick? I apologize. I wasn't doing my job. I was invited here as a lawyer, and as I was like listening to this, it just dawned on me like maybe I should do a little quick legal research and try and give people the reality around what the law is. And I don't know the exact circumstances in which the Issaquah Police Department wanted to bring a drug detection dog onto the campus, but all of a sudden my lawyer brain kicked in and I did a little quick research. And this is on my phone, mind you. children within a public school have a right to privacy and to search them